touching bases and seeing how other people are applying these new tools, or these tools that are being repurposed, so that you can incorporate it into your research projects. Because again, in order to address this situation, we need to dive beyond just a couple, 2 or 3 folks from a couple agencies addressing this field. We need to go beyond that. We need to have every national forest and every national park trying to quantify the level of damage, because what that's going to happen is going to at least develop that budgetary expense that's going to be necessary to remediate and to clean up these sites. Because I think that's one of our first aims, is cleaning up these sites, remediating these sites, but also letting folks know too that we also, based off of the last session, as you heard from the Forest Service and the Fish and Wildlife folks and the National Director, stating that there's just also a lack of enforcement personnel to go out there and stem this off in the beginning. So that's also going to be a key tool, because no matter what, even beyond whatever liberalization of the marijuana policy occurs, you're still going to have folks who want to go ahead there and inundate our public lands. So we want to also stem that off. So that's another tool community folks or agency folks can let folks know, is trying to stem that off with the proper support. So with that, our first speaker is Mark Higley. Mr. Higley is a wildlife biologist for the Hoopa Tribe. You heard my introduction earlier, but one thing I'd like to also just kind of add a personal note with Mark is Mark has been basically this catalyst behind me and calling me up and instigating lost weekends and lost days, saying, would you like to come out to sites and check this out? Or, I have a couple new sites, Murad. What do you think? And next thing I know is, Mark, what are you doing tomorrow? Let's go out and check it out. So, of course, it's a safety issue, but he's been countless hours in the field with me and just shaking our heads, but I guess it's been fun. So with that, if we can give a warm welcome to Mark Higley.
This will be my 4th and final talk. A level of insanity I hope not to repeat anytime soon. But of all the talks I've done, this is the one that I'm most excited about getting feedback from people that know something about modeling, because I truly don't. I just spent the last 3 weeks working on this, about 14 to 16 hours a day, and all I can think of is the late Shane Krogan and how passionate he was about everything as far as cleaning up this mess, and that would keep me going to keep working on this. So with that, I'm going to see if I can make the clicker work, and start off with acknowledgments this time, because I often forget to do that, and the collaboration aspect of this. NMI and HIDA provided some law enforcement information to us that was integral to being able to do this modeling. And without that, obviously, we'd all be lost. So as far as being able to have a clue what the potential risks of these species might be. And then, of course, Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Service, and working with Murad and Greta on this stuff. It's been indispensable. First of all, we're not going to be talking about these. These are those private land roads. They're everywhere you can see from outer space. Somebody else can model that. We are going to talk about these that are harder to see. Not sure if you can see any of them, in fact. These things are away from the road often, in the woods, hard to see in ridiculous spots. And of course, in this one, you can actually see the plants. This is part of a site that was active in 2012 when this image was taken. It was eradicated in 2013 with 40,000 plants. And so this is just a small piece of what ended up in this area the following year. Those are the things that we're trying to model here, the effects or potential for these things on the landscape. And I want to emphasize, and I can't emphasize this enough really, it wouldn't matter if they were growing soybeans, strawberries, cilantro, or corn out there. And I've seen cilantro and corn and squash. So here's some corn stalks at a Mill Creek grow site on Hoopa in 2012. What they're doing is illegal. They're trespassing on tribal or public lands and raping the environment. And if any agency proposed to do this, they'd never get through NEPA, I promise. Of course, the thing that keyed us off to this in the beginning was the exposure to these really bad chemicals in fishers, and the fact that we have nearly 80% exposure rate of fishers in California, and 40% of barred owls at Green Diamond, and 59% of the backcountry owls at Hoopa. That's definitely bad. But as Murad and others have pointed to, we have a carbofuran, and sometimes it's in the sprayers, sometimes it's mixed with tuna. Why might they be using this in the environment? Can you see me make my little video clip go? So there's a little bear. Here's a tin can that we were using as a bait station when we were doing a bear deterrence study. When we put the bait in there, it took less than 6 hours for a bear to find it in all cases. At some of the sites, the student that was doing this work identified 35 bears. We have a lot of bears in Northern California. Hoopa is probably ground central for it. This particular bear that we affectionately called Fat Bastard was 450 pounds in May of the year that he got his radio collar, and easily 500 pounds at this time. That would be scary if you're living out there and you're trying to keep your food safe. Of course, we also have a fairly high mortality rate just from toxicosis. This changes, by the way, almost annually because different causes will kick in and come into play. This is animal 207. He weighed 5.2 kilograms when he was captured, and when he died, he was 3.5 kilograms. Almost every time they lose a third to two-thirds, or a third to half their body weight, and it must be a miserable death to die. One thing I would point out, though, is predation. This number went way up. The previous year, I had 35% toxicosis, and it was the highest cause of mortality on our study site. But after last year, we've had 4 male predations in the last year. 3 of those were in May and June. So if you remember the video clip that Rod showed earlier of the staggering fisher out there, we may have just had those animals feeling the effects of toxicosis to be picked off by the predator. And in the case of males, it's almost always mountain lion. Everything that we've confirmed is bad at Hoopa. And so there's not much left of it when you're done. So the cause of mortality is going to always be predation. And yet it could be still something to do with that. Looking at changes in our population of fishers, some of you that have been following our fisher work may remember that we had a dramatic decline prior to the start of our study here. It went from really unbelievable number of animals, about 1 per square mile, down to a fairly low number when we first started our study in 2004-05, our current study. And since then, the female portion of the population has been increasing. These numbers on this chart are just raw capture, so individuals captured within our capture, mark recapture study area each year from 2004-05 up through where we are today with our current trapping effort. And I point that out because we're getting really close to the end, and we have 9 males captured so far. Usually by this time of the season, we have between 8 and 10 radio collared, and we've only radio collared 4 because those are the only ones that meet our criteria of being non-juveniles or at least sub-adult males. We don't do the juveniles because they disperse away. And so our male portion of the population is declining dramatically, it seems. The market capture survival estimates for male fishers has been on a steady decline since the beginning of our study. And I highlighted these because these are the years that we had. During the spring of 2010, for example, we had 2 toxicosis cases. During 2011, we didn't have any. And then in 2012, we had 4. And or at least 3. I can't remember now. And then 1 in 2013. And so I know it is contributing to the lower numbers, and I think it's starting to skew our age structure to younger animals. And according to Roger Powell, it's probably the larger mature males that are doing most of the breeding. And so it's some point, this is going to affect our reproduction rate at Hoopa, and it very well could be this year. Now, one of the first things that we did with the data that we obtained from the hideout was to buffer it by one male home range, and so that's what we did with this map. It's kind of just to get you to see that the current range picture in dark green and the historic range have plenty of growth sites out there, and there's actually a fairly high percentage of the current range at both ends here, well over 20%. I think it's close to 23, 24% of the current range that would potentially be impacted just in the years 2010 and 11. That's a very simplistic way to look at this stuff. And then the same sort of thing, this is the range of the northern spotted owl in California, and overlapping the suitable habitat, highest probability of occupancy and higher probability, and then moderate to high probability. So everything on here is suitable habitat for northern spotted owl. So that's just one way to look at it. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through the process that I've been using to try to model grow site selection by the growers, so that we can take that information and intersect it with actual habitat layers of fisher and spotted owls to look at the potential risk of exposure. So these are the points that I have to work with from 2010 to 11. We also got a few additional points for 2012 and 14 that we're using, and so that this map is a little bit older. I included the 2012 and 14 points in this. The first thing that we did is we have a forested mask, and all the pixel sizes for this are 100-meter pixels. And because our species of interest and at risk are fisher and spotted owl living in forest, using a forested mask made sense to me. And so Ray Davis from Forest Service provided me all of the rasters that I used for this, and then walked me through the process and helped teach me how to use the program Maximum to do the modeling that we were showing. So total number of points, 389 points within the range of spotted owl. And I selected out 75 of those points at random and set them aside to use as test data after doing the modeling. And so the modeling itself used 314 points. I used 10 variables: distance to all roads, distance to major roads, distance to disturbance, percent disturbance of a moving window of 300 meter square, distance to population centers, distance to streams, elevation, slope percent, slope standard deviation, and solar radiation. So those are the variables I had to work with going into this. I would still like to be able to use some vegetation characteristics that I don't have yet. And so this is all preliminary work. So this is just an example showing a larger scale of the elevation stuff. And why would elevation be important? Well, if you get up too high, you may be way exposed to being seen from a helicopter. So you want to stay down a little bit lower on the slope in the trees. Plus, you need water, so that comes from above. You have to gravity feed water to every site. So elevation might be important. And you can see another thing I'll point out here is that elevation across the range of northern spotted owl varies from west to east quite a lot. And so one of the steps I think I would like to do is divide this into a coastal and inland province. And in fact, I have done that, and I'm not presenting it here today. Distance to all roads. People need to get around in order to get to these sites. So distance to roads makes sense that it might be an important variable. So that's all I'm going to do as far as emphasizing the variables themselves, and jump into what I did for the modeling process. I ran models with all 10 variables, and then removed one variable at a time and reran the models. In the end, I decided to run it with all 10 variables because they were all contributing something to the final model, and it didn't really improve anything to drop out variables. The best regularization multiplier was 0.75, and I arrived at that by going through intervals of 0.25 RM from 0.25 to 2. And then I reran the best model using all 314 points without any replicas. I forgot to mention up here, everything was done with a random seed, and 25% of the data used as testing within each model. So in the end, there was no replicates. It was run the model and then test it. And these are the importance of the variables that came out of the model. I think I'm getting tired of talking. So elevation was one of the most important variables, followed by distance to all roads, slope percent, and distance to disturbance and down the line here. I'm only going to show a few of the response curves for the highest importance variables. And you can see here that this is in meters, so 500 to 1,500 meters is where the bulk of the grows are occurring out there on the trespass grows, which is about 1,500 feet to almost 5,000 feet. Distance to all roads, almost everything's within about 3.5 kilometers or less. The slope percent, this is kind of an interesting one because they are not shy about being on relatively steep slope. Anybody that's done any work in the woods knows that when we get up to about 40% and above, it gets pretty steep in a hurry. Hard to get around. So a lot of the ground we've been on has been very steep. And so this is the resulting curve from the top model, the one with the RM of 0.75, showing the area under the curve of 0.885, and then the variation around that. And then just learning the training data and the test data, area under the curve is 0.852 for the training data and 0.803 for the test data. So not perfect, but a decent start, I think. And so just looking at a graphic of what the model looks like, it goes from low probability of having to grow to high probability of having to grow sites. And then the data that was used is overlaid on that. So eyeballing it seems sort of like it might fit. Over here we have the way I picked out the 0.75 was the delta gain was the best. That's the difference between the test gain and the test, or the regularized training gain and test gain. And then it had a decent area under the curve for the test A and C. And it had a relatively smooth PE curve, which is the predicted versus expected distribution here. And at the PE equal 1 is 0.37, so that's down really low down in here. And so once you have a model, you have to classify it somehow so that it can be used to make some sense out of things. So what this shows is the way I reclassified it, and this is how it actually worked out. I ran zonal statistics first, and on the all training and test data, it came out, and basically this is the mean of the pixel values underneath every point that was in the test data and training data. 0.555. And so when I reclassified the raster, I have the low risk being less than 0.37, which is that PE value equal 1. Anything lower than that is a low risk of having anything. And then at risk was 0.38 up to that number here of 0.55. And high risk are values that are greater than 0.55. So you start to get a feel for the distribution of the high risk and at risk from this map. And then I threw on all the historic data, which we still don't have attributes for, so we're not really sure if they're all trespass grows or even outdoor grows for that matter. That's what we asked for, was trespass outdoor grows, but what we got had no data with it for years or plants or outdoor, indoor. And so it's just used here as an illustration to show that even with some error in it, it still overlays the model relatively well. And of course, any place that's at high risk or at risk may be a place that we have detriment to fishers. And so now here's where all the real confusion comes in. I've got these at-risk and high-risk that I'm going to overlay on the fisher habitat and intersect it with that to try to come up with an estimate of risk to fisher or amount of habitat that's at risk. And the first thing I want to point out is that Peter Carlson used a quote like this from George P. Box before. I like this version of it, which says, remember that all models are wrong. The practical question is how wrong do they have to be not to be useful? And so I'm taking modeling data from CBI that modeled habitat for fisher up in this area, and then I'm intersecting it with the data from the model I created. And so now we have two wrong models to draw conclusions from. Okay, so this is the total square kilometers of selected for habitat within the fisher range. And you can see there's a big block of it down here that's at risk. And then intermediate habitat, a little less total of it, and so on. So selected against has the least amount of growing going on in it, more than likely. So now what this shows is the percent of each of those categories. So up to almost 40% of the habitat that fishers select for is at risk of having growth sites. And this is kind of like a fire risk map. You don't know when, you just know that at some point there's likely to be fire at these spots. So that's the way that I can envision this. And then the intermediate habitat, a little bit less than, right at about 35%. Looking at the high risk part of this, it's about 18% of all the best fisher habitat is at high risk. So now turning your attention to spotted owl, using the same, take one good model and flop it on top of another good model and hope that there is something real about it or useful about it. First of all, before we get to the habitat part of it, just the critical habitat, which I used in an earlier illustration this morning. Fairly large chunk of critical habitat is at high risk or at risk. And then the highest probability of being selected by spotted owls, also a big chunk of that. And so on, moderately high. And then this is the stuff they don't tend to use. Percentage-wise, fairly large percent again, 40% or so. And of course, this is across a larger area than the fisher area because the fisher current range is smaller than the northern spotted owl current range in California. So anyway, these are big numbers in my opinion, and something not to take too lightly. So how does it perform if you kind of zoom in on a piece of it? And I know this area fairly well. Hoopa Valley Indian Reservation, these are those grow sites I showed you this morning of known grows. I can tell you that the model included only 3 of those points, the building the model, because that's all that had been found in that 2010-11 data. And the one that was here in 2012 didn't show up in the law enforcement data set, and there was none found here in 2014. So only 3 points on this map that part of building the model. And if you remember, I said to keep these in mind this morning, these exposed water owls down at the southern end. And I can tell you that my crew has come across water pipes in the woods here and here. We just don't know where the actual grows are. And so I think that this model might be of some value and use in predicting where stuff might be on the landscape. And I probably should get back up to, well, yeah, here, this will work. So first of all, one other species we might use this for in this model is the martin, Humboldt martin. This is just a rough approximation of where they currently are on the landscape because I didn't have an actual file for their current range. So it's an approximation. But one thing I wanted to point out, and I'm not sure if I have to go back. Anyway, I'm not going to go way back right here. Fairly big patch of area that only has 3 grow sites that fall within that. And it looks like maybe a pretty high likelihood that they would be there. And I would almost guarantee they are. That area is the Forks of Salmon. Anybody ever been there? What better place to go grow marijuana and not be bothered by law enforcement? A helicopter can get there in a heartbeat, but officers on the ground caravanning out to do a bust, it's 4 hours to 5 hours one way from anywhere.